Chapter 20 of A Superfluous Woman by Emma Frances Brooke. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bruce Peary. Old Rory McGilvray, sitting in the nook by the kitchen hearth, fancied that his dim eyes caught sight of the fluttering of a woman's garment past the window. The rain beat slantwise across the smoke-stained pane, but he had an impression that with the rain the wind had puffed some loose grey streamer over the blurred outlines and mist-washed shapes of the mountains. It made him stare and open his mouth wider, and turn his head and his ear in an endeavour to supplement one failing sense by the failing power of another. Then the idea of the fluttering shawl touched some association, and he sat thinking of it, his mouth still open, and his eyes perusing the smouldering peats on the hearth, upon which, in comfortless fashion through the open chimney, grimy raindrops fell in frequent spurts. His old wife, a plaid about her shoulders and an umbrella, or rather a blue roof, in her hand, had set out at an early hour on a 5-mile walk to the merchant's, that is, to the store of the universal provider of the place, an emporium warranted to supply all human wants, from curling irons down to a ha'porth of treacle, in addition to which large enterprise the merchant had undertaken to manage the post-office necessities for 10 miles round. Those who possessed their souls in patience were really likely to get their needs supplied at the shop, for it was well stocked. But the drawback of a monopoly is to breed an indifference of spirit which rebels against the routine involved in business habits. So that the customer, arriving hot and breathless from a long and burdened peregrination over the hills, was as likely as not to discover the postmaster and manager nodding in the back parlour in a hopelessly bewhiskied slumber, while a slow and confused boy pottered over the post-office business, from which no entreaty could seduce him, and the girl engaged in farm work at the back would peep in to acquaint herself with the customer, and 10 to 1 would disappear again with a final air. Old Rory, therefore, from prolonged experience, did not expect the return of his wife for hours to come. As for Colin, he was attending the sale of corn with John Mackenzie, so that the old man's mind, roused to momentary attention, trotted off again tranquilly to 50 years ago, when the things that happened had not so dim and vague an air, and when the fluttering of a shawl, by no means belonging to the present Mrs. McGilvray, had been an incident of consequence. The world was not so good as it had been, old Rory frequently remarked. Events had little interest. Whiskey, it is true, retained its fascination, and while his eyes twinkled at the peats in the delights of disreputable reminiscence, his old hand sought at the shelf by his side. There is reason to believe that the old fellow had been left at home alone on parole, for Mrs. McGilvray held it a disgrace to be drunken at the 3rd hour of the day. Nevertheless, his fingers were just nearing the recess where the whiskey bottle stood, when a knock came at the door. Old Rory's hand was jerked down by frightened conscience, much as the hand of a child is snatched back from forbidden sweetmeats, and he stared hard at the direction of the sound. It came back again. Then he felt for his staff and slowly raised himself, showing, as he stood up on the kitchen floor, a not inconsiderable height, and went to the outside door and opened it. A little figure in grey stood there, at the sight of which he jerked his head forward in an attempt to surprise his senses into grasping its full meaning, and then, lifting himself to as erect a posture as possible, made the salute of the peasant. He did not in the least recognize in Jessamine the Mackenzies' farm help, of whom he had heard much, but he did recognize the air of a great lady. "Is Mr. Colin McGilvray at home?" asked Jessamine, who knew very well that he was not. "No, ma'am. Colin is away. He went west this morning, and he was taking the horse and cart." "Will he return soon?" "I'm thinking, ma'am, that he will be back this evening. He was going to a sale of corn with John Mackenzie. Him and John will be great friends, ye see." "I am sorry not to find him in. It rains fast." "It's a very bad morning, whatever. Will ye come in, ma'am, and rest ye a while?" "Thank you." Jessamine stepped forward without alacrity. She had been gazing at old Rory's face with fascinated interest, and yet with horror. It was so fine, and yet so grotesque, the civilization faintly veneered over the obvious barbarism. His features were of the Scandinavian type, the racial markings still as pronounced as in the age when the Viking harried the coasts. The upper classes pare away the traces of their ancestry. The rustic peasant startles the fastidious by retaining them unmodified. Moreover, besides his wild though grand tribal features, old Rory was not clean, nor were his manners pleasant. His corduroy clothes were greasy, and his woolen shirt was open, revealing a shaggy breast. The course of ages and the surrounding of a gentle-mannered people had, as it were, trimmed the claws of the ogre. Old Rory was incapable of cruelty. He was hospitable, and had a strong sense of personal dignity. He possessed with this a conservative, though independent, respect for the laird and the great world of which he knew nothing. He believed in the election of the saints, and had no doubt of his own salvation, and though his youth had been somewhat tinctured with the disreputable element, and in the matter of whisky he was still an impenitent, on the whole he was reckoned among the highly respectable members of society. But then culture had given but the hastiest daub to his once splendid animal physique. Of all that manifold limitation in air, speech, gesture, which we call good manners, and which is woven out of an inherited and acquired knowledge of that which is pleasant or unpleasant to our fellows, he knew nothing. The unlimited and the dubious render intercourse impossible. Disparity of manner is as disparity of race, an incalculable thing. Jessamine, therefore, followed old Rory with trembling. She would have shivered to have followed a red Indian into his wigwam, or a Zulu into his kraal, or an amiable gorilla up his tree, and her sensations were not materially different now. Still, she was resolved. He was Colin's father. "May I see your kitchen?" asked she, as old Rory turned to the room on the left, to which Colin had ushered her on her first visit to Dolfaber. "Oh, yes, ma'am," answered Rory. "It will just not be cleaned up the morn, you see, but ye can come in, and welcome." He opened the door into the kitchen, where he had just been sitting. It was a square room, with low wooden rafters, and the rafters and ceiling were black with smoke. The floor was of stone, and so was the hearth. This last was simply a flat surface raised 2 or 3 inches, and extending across the room. The arch of the chimney hung above it, and was simply an immense cavernous aperture, the size of a small room, which, without diminution in its proportions, opened to the sky. The shelterless nature of such a contrivance was exemplified now by the dribbles of wet which came down upon the soot-covered wall and fell about the hearth. Old McGilvray, however, evidently regarded his chimney as a show. He beckoned Jessamine to approach the hearth and to look up. She did so, and saw 4 stone walls festooned with soot, above them a grey sky, across which trails of rain-cloud swept. A thin spiral of smoke was whirling about toward the top, in momentary indecision whether to rise or descend. "Surely," said Jessamine, "you are smothered with smoke on windy days?" "Oh, ay," answered old Rory, "we will just be smothered. You see, the vent's too large. You see, the smoke blaws down back into the room, and that makes the rafters black. And you see, it will be very cauld in the winter time. But," added he, "we're used to it." His smoke-ingrained skin well testified that time had lent the clemency of habit. As for the rest of the room, there were good presses against the wall. There was a table, a wooden bench, and a chair or two, shelves with pots and pans, and an indescribable piece of furniture, which Jessamine suspected to be a bed. "Will your Highness like to see the other room?" asked old Rory, throwing in a title which he judged commensurate with his guest's distinguished air. "Thank you," said Jessamine, unwilling to confess to a former visit. "We live mostly in the kitchen, you see, for comfort," explained old Rory, "but we have the parlour." And he led the way to the other well-remembered room. There was the bed in the alcove, the clothes tossed aside as Colin had left them that morning, a couple of tables, a few chairs, a rifle leaning against the wall, a small looking-glass, for Colin was something of a dandy, one or two books, a vase or two upon the mantelpiece, and a small ordinary grate. The floor was without drugget, but everything was neat and orderly. "This will be the parlour, ma'am, and that will be Colin's bed. Colin sleeps here, ma'am. This will be his rifle, for Colin was joining the volunteers, you see." "Colin is your only son?" "Colin will be our only son, ma'am. He will be having the farm after me." Here old Rory assumed a confidential air, and approached close to Jessamine, who felt exceedingly alarmed, nor was she at all encouraged by the laying of his hand upon her shoulder. "He will be a solid man, ye see, ma'am, with money at the bank. I'm telling ye this, ma'am, not to boast, but that ye may just know that Colin will be something. He was ever a very quiet lad with his words." "You live very simply," said Jessamine, edging back nervously from the old peasant's confidences. "Oh, ay, vera simple. Just porridge and potatoes, with a kipper now and then, and milk. That will be it. A very good diet, ye see. Folks will be overheating themselves with meat. Oh, ay, I'm often saying that porridge is the finest diet in the world." Jessamine smiled. Not even the terrible presence of old Rory could quite overshadow the wistful strangeness in her heart at standing in the room of the man she loved. She leaned against the window frame, looking out upon his beloved landscape, and ineffectually envying his austerity and simplicity. "You must excuse me, ma'am," said old Rory, seeing that she made no answer, "if I am not speaking the English right. You see, I'm not vera good at the English." "Oh," said Jessamine, "do you speak Gaelic?" "Oh, ay, we will just be talking wi' Gaelic at home. I can go into more things in the Gaelic. I must ever be looking for my words in the English. Your Highness will understand." Jessamine looked up quickly, a pink spot in either cheek. "Do not call me your Highness. I am the Mackenzies' farm help at Drynach." Old Rory's jaw dropped at this information. His mind had a long way to travel from the title of his invention to the simplicity of Jessamine's claim, and her aspect belied her words. At last, while she rather tremulously watched him, the bewilderment passed from his face. He made an emphatic gesture with his hand, bringing it down to his side with a slap. "Aweel," said he, "aweel, the farm help at Mackenzie's. It's come on me of a suddenty. Dear, 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 I'm no very good with my eyes, and I was taking ye for a grand leddy. Ay, but ye are bonny. I'm not so blind but I can see that. Ye are bonny. Lads will let ye know it, I'm thinking, and you'll be trailing a good few at your heels. Ay, I was hearing of ye, a bonny wee lassie at Mackenzie's. But ye'll no be much hand at the working? I am strong. I can do as much as most. Mrs. Mackenzie thinks I have learned a good deal, said Jessamine, feeling rather like one who has swept down all defences with his own hand. Ay, ye will just be learning, so as ye can manage your own farm, I'm thinking. He turned rather a cunning eye upon her. Perhaps, said Jessamine. Then she added hastily, and are you able to work upon the land yourself still, Mr. McGilvray? Oh, I can plant and hoe and lift potatoes myself vera weel, but Colin, he will be rare at the working, ma'am. He looked sideways at Jessamine, a cunning thought visibly changing his features, and he nodded his head more than once. Indeed, said Jessamine. The old man approached again with his terrifying air of confidence. Jessamine's little start backward did not discourage him. He came and laid a patronizing hand upon her shoulder. Ay, Colin will be an awful clever lad. When he was a bit bairn, and a charge was laid upon him, he was aye on the alert. Oh, yes, he will just go straight on, and you won't be stopping him. He will have the farm when I'm gone, mem, and Colin will be a great match, mem. A solid man with money in the bank. Ay, I was a saving mon in my day, and Colin's bonny, mem, bonny. Still with his hand on her shoulder, he looked into her face, grinning confidentially. Yes, murmured Jessamine faintly. The lassies was ever running after Colin. He gave her shoulder a pat as he spoke, and then drew back and expanded himself into the joviality of reminiscence. I was a great mon for lassies when I was young, but that will be a great while ago, mem. Yes, 80 years, I'm thinking, or more. But I was ever for lassies, and Colin will be his father's own son. Favours me, ma'am, in his features, but he will be quieter. Yes. Lassies will be ever running after him, though. They will know a bonny lad when they will see one. I was saying to Colin, Colin, I was saying, you'll be choosing a lass one of these days. Old Rory chuckled. Yes. And Colin was just laughing. Old Rory bent himself together in a quite inexplicable ecstasy. Yes, said Jessamine. I'm saying to him sometimes, Colin, I am saying, you will be choosing a lassie and bringing her home. Again he approached Jessamine, and laying the tips of his fingers upon her shoulder, stood leaning back and chuckling with a lively mirth. She gazed at him with fascinated intensity, tracing through his dirt and grotesque manners the curious faint remains of Colin's bonniness and grandeur, in type of which he had claimed the parentage. Suddenly he withdrew his hand and crumpled up his smiling features into a shrewder look. Ye see, said he, we will be wanting a lassie about the bit hoosie now. The auld wife, she's aging fast, and we would be glad, very glad, of a thumping lassie to scrub round and gather and hoe a bit. But my Colin, he's slaw, I tell ye, slaw and canny, my Colin will be. He shook his head with affected gravity and great concern. Ay, my Colin's slaw, but I'll just be telling ye ae thing, and I'd no be telling it to every lassie. My Colin will stick. A lassie will just be dealing skilful with my Colin, and he'll stick. Slaw he may be, but he ever was for sticking since he was young. He surveyed her to see the effect of his words. "Yes," said Jessamine. "And I'll tell ye I ither thing. My Colin's aye very tender in his feelings. Good bless ye, that was myself when I was young. But a mon wears a bit better when he will be 80 year. My Colin, he will be tender, and a lassie will just be saying snap to his snip. A lassie will, if she was skilful, and my Colin, he will stick." Having delivered himself of these predicates, old Rory drew a deep breath and gazed down at the lassie before him. "I am rested now," said Jessamine, whose eyes perused the ground, "and I think the rain has stopped. I will go now, and I thank you very much." Rory disentangled his mind with difficulty from its preoccupation, and with a very dignified air opened the door to let Jessamine pass. As she did so, she glanced up the staircase, which disappeared into some nondescript region above. "That is your bedroom up there, I suppose?" said she. "Oh, na, that will just be a make a loft. Me and my auld wife, we sleep in the kitchen, just for comfort, ye see. But," he added cunningly, "I'm not for saying that Colin wouldn't knock up a bit room upstairs for the lass and the bairnies when they come." "When Colin is married, you and Mrs. McGilvery will remain here, then?" "Oh, ay," returned old Rory, with the tranquillity of full assurance. "He wouldn't be turning on his old father and mother, whatever." "No. I will go now, Mr. McGilvery. Thank you, and good-bye." "Good morning to ye, ma'am," said the old peasant, standing on the threshold and involuntarily saluting the high breeding in Jessamine. "I am most pleased to be seeing ye, and we will be very pleased if we was seeing ye again." End of chapter 20.